straight down here, staircase, all the way out the building, and that's as simple as that, really. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, and we hope you have a great time. And over to you.
Over to you. If we hear the fire alarm, we're going to carry on. Right.
The last time I was involved in a fire alarm was in Manchester, covering a game on a Sunday. It was a Saturday night. We were all tipped out into the street, and you won't believe this. Amongst those who were turfed out into the street, Diego Maradona. Yeah, so you've got a tough act to follow if we get out tonight.
Okay. Are you ready?
The Joy of Football podcast. With me, Neil Barnett.
And with me, Martin Tyler.
Looks Rashadi! Ready! Aguero!
The Joy of Football.
Hello, and this is John Lewis Wine Bar in Oxford Street, and cheers, everybody. Cheers. It's nice, lovely to be here. My name is Neil Barnett. This is the Joy of Football podcast. I spent 30 years working inside Chelsea, 30 plus. I presented a radio show in the USA and Canada for 14 years from here. And this is Martin Tyler, the greatest commentator in the world. The voice of the Premier League for 31 years and still working.
Still working, and to have an audience in front of us is an amazing experience. This is our 14th show, I think. And it's live! Certainly for you, not for those who are watching it after the event, but let's hope we have a great live experience which will translate in a recorded state to our loyal followers, which I think the numbers are still going up, Neil.
Yep.
From 3 to 4, but we're okay.
Now, obviously, in a live show, we'd normally, or they would normally have a warm-up act, which we can't afford. So this is the warm-up act. I'm going to give you a joke, and then we'll carry on, okay? This is the warm-up act. So the devil hacks into God's Wi-Fi and says to her, challenges her to a game of football, the oldest rivalry, heaven versus hell. And God says, don't be silly. You haven't got a cat in hell's chance. Cat in hell's chance. And the devil says, we'll beat you. And when we do, you've got to give me 5 days to run amok. And God says, you're on. God calls up St. Paul and says, get a team together, heaven versus hell. We got to beat them. So St. Paul gets a team together. And what a team. What a team. Gordon Banks in goal, Bobby Moore at the back with Jack Charlton. In midfield, Franz Beckenbauer with Johan Cruyff. And up front, Garrincha, Pele, Maradona, George Best. And they have a couple of training sessions and off they go to take on hell. 2 days later, they return and everyone looks miserable. And St. Paul goes round to God, goes in and shakes his head. And God says, what happened? And St. Paul says, we lost 3-0. And God said, how could you? We've got all the players. And St. Paul said, yeah, but they had all the referees. Right. Just before we go, actually, I got sent a joke this morning. I just better quickly tell everyone because it's contemporary.
It's
and
a long warm-up act, by the way.
Yeah.
Longer than the podcast.
England
If
players,
you laugh, it will be.
England players are not voting in the election because they don't know where the box is, so there's no way they can put a cross in it. Old ones are the best. Okay, we break this.
That was a very contemporary one, actually.
We break this podcast into segments. The last segment, which we call Stoppage Time, is going to be about England. So we'll get round to England, which make everybody miserable at the end. But the first segment is called, and this is a special one this week, Sad to See You Go. And it is the departure of 8 countries and 8 squads of 26 players from the first round of games, the group games at the Euros.
We picked today for this event because obviously the group stage finished yesterday.
Yeah.
So we can really look at it in an analytical way. And yeah, 8 teams, got a lot of games to get rid of 8 out of 24, 36 games. But it's the process. And it's been, I think, a tournament that's had some highs. It was very good at the start. Obviously been very tense recently, but we now know who's gone, don't we?
Yep, and just in case you haven't actually heard them all together, the teams that have gone: Scotland, Hungary, Albania, Croatia, Serbia, Poland, Ukraine, and Czech Republic. Bye-bye. And who are you sad to see go?
Well, it's perhaps a serious note to start the podcast on, but Ukraine, for reasons that we all understand in this room, but I've been with them. I was there when Wales beat them actually to go to the World Cup final in 2 years ago now, which was a massive night for Wales. But parochially, it was a great celebration around the world. There was a lot of sadness, of course, for reasons that we don't need to go into. But they are an amazing group. I mean, to qualify for the Euros was extraordinary. They had no home ground to play in. I think they played in their home games in 4 different countries. So to qualify was extraordinary. And they were in this group where everybody had the same points and ended up with the same points. And so they've actually gone out with 4 points, which is very, very tough. In a way, it makes me think about the argument that maybe you should be making the decision based on points, not on positions. So if you finish with 4 points and you're bottom, the teams that stayed in have got 3 points because they finished third. So there's a bit of injustice in there. But for Ukraine to be playing football, they're playing league games in their own country where sometimes the sirens go off, and I think one game lasted about 5 hours because they're going in, going out again, but they're so determined to get, as they are determined in the struggle that they're in on a wider front. So yeah, very, very sorry to see them go, particularly in those circumstances. If they got no points, you'd have to say, well, that's the way it is. But to go out in a group where it was so tight, they perhaps deserved a little bit better fate, but that's what it is.
You went to a load of games in Donetsk, depending whether you're Russian or
I call
Ukrainian.
it Donetsk because that's the Ukraine. It's in Ukraine. Well,
you went to a load of games there in the Euros when it was Ukraine and Poland.
Yeah.
I went to a game there with Chelsea in the Champions League, and I went to a game in Kiev, which was Kiev and not Kyiv in those days. And I went into the subway in Kiev, and there was a little tourist shop in there. And one of the things that they were selling, and this was obviously this was post the Russians going into the Donetsk region, but obviously well before the war. And in this tourist shop, they were selling toilet paper. And on every sheet of toilet paper was Putin's face. And I remember buying a couple of rolls to bring back as presents, sort of tourist thing. But I mean, it was a powder keg waiting to explode all those years. And
they brought joy to football. That's why we're doing this podcast, because there's obviously a lot of critical stuff about the game out there and critical stuff about the world. But if you just isolate, if you can, what Ukrainian footballers have done for their country over the last 3 years is it's just an extraordinary effort, and they deserve all our applause, really. And people like Zinchenko, who obviously plays over here, can articulate those feelings in a way that would be beyond most of us, I think, certainly beyond us. I'm very proud to have worked for so long in football and been around football virtually all my life. And sometimes you question it, but then you realize that it is something that binds us all together. And in difficult times, sometimes it's as much comfort as celebration. And I think there's a lot of comfort for Ukrainians through the Ukraine national team.
Yeah, and if you followed the qualifiers for the last World Cup, the Asian qualifiers, Syria, who can't play anywhere near Syria, got to the final game of the qualifiers and only just missed out then going into the playoffs. These countries who have impossible situations in order to play football often come up with really heroic games and almost do the impossible. So I'm with you on Ukraine. Individual player.
Well, Luka Modric is somebody who's entertained me. I've been lucky enough to see him play, obviously, for Tottenham. Many of you in this room might have seen him play for Tottenham. Tim Sherwood, who was his manager for a little while, said he's the best defensive midfield player he's ever worked with, and yet you don't think of Luca as a defensive player. Think about him super creative, but that kind of his game, he's defensive because he can nick the ball from the opposition rather than out tackle them. He's got an amazing range of skills, and he's still playing, and he's such a professional. He wants to play at the highest level. I don't know whether we've seen the last of him.
He says he wants to play on.
Yeah, he does. He will want to play on. He's a bit of a Cristiano Ronaldo in that sense. And I'm sure that
He's better looking than Cristiano Ronaldo.
He wants to stay on with Real Madrid, even though, and we're not going to really concentrate on this today, but Carlo Ancelotti deserves a wonderful mention here with Modric, because he said, when he obviously knows, Luca knows, that he's not going to be a regular in the team at Real Madrid every week. He said he'll be on the bench, and I'm only going to make him warm up if he's going to come on. I'm not going to get him go out there like a lot of younger players would have to just do it to be ready. But Luca can sit with me until I know he's going to go on there. He warms up and he knows he's going to go on. That kind of respect is wonderful. So very sad to see him go. They had their chances in this tournament, and they are a little bit of an end of an era, really, but he will fight on. He probably won't be the first to depart the international scene. He wants to keep playing. It's an amazing number of caps. I think only Ronaldo's got more caps in European football ever than Luka Modric.
They never replaced Rakitic after the World Cup final.
You like Rakitic, don't you?
I loved Rakitic. Yeah. I saw him when he was 20, and he lived up to everything I saw then.
There's another amazing thing about these Croatian players. They speak about 8 languages fluently. Yeah. And But
also the Croatian players, none of them were born in Croatia because of the war.
We're going to keep off the wars. Yeah, we'll keep off the wars.
But they've had very difficult upbringings.
We've got to talk about Chelsea yet, so the wars might come back.
That's the biggest bloody war of all. But Rakitic was never really replaced by Kovacic. No. Not the same level, and Modric hasn't been replaced because no one's as good. It's very hard for them. So I'm agreeing with you on that as well. I want to throw in one other sad to see you go, and that's Scotland supporters who have lit up the tournament. And there was a wonderful piece on the BBC before the Germany-Scotland game, the opening game, where they went into the market square, and I hate vox pops on television. I think it's the cheap way of getting...
That means interviewing fans and grabbing a comment.
Or just people on the street in the news. Why do we talk to people of authority when we can talk to the ignorant? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. But they went into this marketplace and they interviewed these 2 Germans who were sitting there drinking. And they said, are you very confident? Do you feel as though your city's been taken over? And they looked up, and this guy said in perfect English with a German accent, he said, Germany is better on the pitch. Scotland is better off the pitch. Absolute perfect explanation.
They are amazing, the Scotland fans. I mean, going way back, some of you might remember this, but the fans stormed at Wembley and ripped up the goalposts and things like that, which would not... it was a tribalism between the 2 countries rather than hooliganism. And I grew up, the rivalry between England and Scotland was the rivalry of international football. There wasn't
played every year.
Played every year. The Home International Championships, which finished 40 years ago, something like that. But the England-Scotland games had amazing scorelines, and when England won the World Cup, they didn't lose a game until they played Scotland the following year, and Scotland thought they were world champions because they'd beaten the world champions for the first team to beat them since Bobby Moore held up the trophy. So they are fantastic. It's a shame. Steve Clarke, we both know, Neil knows him better than me because of the Chelsea connection, but I think he's done an amazing piece of work with all the difficulties. Scotland's selection, Lyndon Dykes, their best striker, pulled out on the eve of the game, and quite a few players weren't available for them. And their resources are very, very limited. So to have that backing, which is just, they forgive everything, Scotland. As long as the team puts in an effort, doesn't matter. I mean, Germany were very good in that opening game, but they were back for more. I wouldn't be surprised if they're all still in Germany, still trying to, just enjoy their time. But they're a great credit to the country, and the players did their best. And I hope Clarkey stays because he's added with limited resources, as I say, he's made them at least difficult to play against.
Yeah, and there was a vote on one of the German television stations as to which supporters were the best supporters in the tournament last week, and Scotland got over 50% of the vote. So I think that's an incredible credit.
That should help their FIFA ranking, really, shouldn't it?
Okay, sad to see you go. Finished. Next segment. You light up our lives. These are the teams that did well in the group stage of the Euros. Martin.
Well, I've fallen in love with Austria and their football. It's just so. It's when you have players who recognise that they're better as a group than as individuals, you've got half a chance. And they're often players who are perhaps never going to be that good as individuals to be real starry players. And the coach is Ralph Rangnick, who many of you will know had a spell in charge of Manchester United, where he was seen as a bit of an academic coming in. They didn't really get what he wanted them to do. I don't think they perhaps really liked the way he went about doing it. And there was a complete disconnect. Now Rangnick has got a group of players who will do everything that he says, and the Austrian public are in love with him. And to quote an old film, if you like, or an old show, the hills are alive with the sound of Rangnick. And climb every mountain is perhaps what they're trying to do. Obviously, you don't remember the film, so my jokes aren't as good as Neil's. But I think they're terrific in the way they go about it. They have got some good players, of course, as well. But they're just unequivocal. That's our plan. We're going to press. If you press, you impress. That's the way football is at the moment. And England are trying to do that, but they're not doing it well enough, so they're not impressing us. But Austria have got it absolutely right, and it'll be interesting to see how hard they get. They're sort of Germany light normally, the Austrians. They've got a lot of the qualities of German players, but they're not quite as, they don't play in quite such a good league unless, of course, they go to Germany like some of them do. But they're under Germany's shadow football-wise, and now they're going to give a good account of themselves. And it's nearly a home game for them, isn't it? The fans have travelled all over. Germany's a wonderful venue for this tournament because everybody seems to be able to get there easy. Apparently, when you're in Germany, and I've heard some terrible stories from my colleagues who are out in Germany, the transport. I went to the World Cup in 2006. It was marvellous. The trains were on time. Everything was Vorsprung Durtechnik. You know, it's just apparently it's not like that now. I was listening to Martin Keown do a commentary yesterday, and it took him 7.5 hours to get from where he was to the game that he was commentating on, a nightmare journey. So there's a bit of infrastructure that's not working there, but everybody is getting there. They might not be getting around it easily, but they're there. And that's what's made it such a special tournament. The noise levels, which as a commentator you really appreciate. There's nothing worse than quiet stadium when you've got to try and make it sound exciting. It'd be wonderful for the boys out there to work with.
Great. Bring back Willy Brandt.
Yes. So Austria for me are special because I think if you look at the level of expectation for all countries, they've gone higher above their level of expectation than anybody else in the tournament.
Marcel Sabitzer, I've said before, I think is a really good player. Jesse Marsh, the American manager, was in charge of RB Salzburg when COVID broke out. And I had him on the radio, and he said it's a population of 9 million people. And he said, and they've got the culture here that if the government says you have to do this to protect yourselves, they all do it. And he said, and so far, fingers crossed, COVID has been lower in Austria than percentage-wise, the population, than in almost any other country in Europe, because they do what they're told. That's their culture. And
well, they're doing what Rangnick tells them, that's for sure.
Yeah. A player.
Well, I'm not going to stand up for this, but I should really. I was want to be non-league centre forward of a certain height. And so I love those kind of players. And Nicholas Füllkrug is not quite from non-league, but from lower league football in Germany. Very late developer, and found himself suddenly thrust because there was nobody else into the German team. And he came on, played a couple of games, the World Cup, scored goals. And now he would have started these games, but he was injured just before the tournament began. But he is a no-nonsense,
Rumbustious.
Identikit centre forward from the old days, really. Great in the air, can be found. He's got an eye for goal. He takes shots early, which it was a great skill, really. And he's also the nicest bloke in German football. There was a poll, Neil. These Germans must love a poll because you've had a reference to one. I'm going to give you another one now. Who would you, of the German squad, who would you most like to go out to dinner with? And there's some competition here. Toni Kroos is a top bloke and obviously coming to the end of his career. He only finished third. Thomas Müller. Don't show my age here. Thomas Müller is larger than life. He's a wonderful personality, great character, lights up a room. He was second. Füllkrug was first. I don't need to say anything else.
And he's got long hair, so he's it. Right. My team is Georgia. I've just loved watching Georgia. And my players, you're going to have to help me here.
Yes.
Are the goalkeeper, Georgia Marmadashvili.
This is the one you're going to struggle
The
with.
left winger, Kavica Kvaratskhelia, known in Naples by the Napoli fans as Kvarat Madonna.
No, Kvaradonna.
Kvaradonna, right.
Kvaradonna.
And the top scorer in the tournament so far, George Mikatadze. Now, I choose those three players because they're all 23 years old. Quite phenomenal. And Marmadashvili, who is the Valencia goalkeeper, and for me is one of the two best goalkeepers in the tournament with Mike Maignan of France. I want Chelsea to buy one of those two this summer because if you actually want to be in the Champions League, you've got to get a Champions League quality goalkeeper and not an MLS Major League Soccer from America quality
Chelsea fans,
goalkeeper.
and there are plenty in the room, they will understand what we're talking about.
So this guy is huge. He's a huge personality. He dominates his penalty area. He makes wonderful saves, and he's the real deal. Quaradonna, to use the Italian version because it's easier, didn't have a great season last season, but the previous year he was the best player in Serie A, won the Player of the Year, and won Serie A. He had a magnificent season. And Mikatadze, I mean, I'd not heard of him before the Euros.
No, we've heard of him now.
Yeah.
I mean, he's top scorer with 3, but Lukaku would have had 3, but they were all disallowed by VAR, which was very tough on him. And he's still a Chelsea player now. But Mikatadze has 2 great penalties under pressure. And I would have put them right alongside Austria, really, in terms of punching above their weight, you know. And they just don't give the opposition any chance, basically. They keep on it. They're in your face team. And when they played against Portugal reserves, basically, I mean, you wouldn't take any of those Portugal reserves because they made them look like they shouldn't even be in the tournament. It was a wonderful performance. First win, first tournament, first win into the knockout phase. The latest story, which I just picked up on my phone earlier today while I was here, is there's some ex-politician who's going to give them stacks and stacks of money for what they've done so far. And if they win the game, and they're playing Spain, is that right? And Spain are the only team that have won all 3 group games, so it's a big ask for them to win again. But you wouldn't bet against it because there isn't much between, in the 16 qualifiers, there isn't much between the team that you would all think is 16 and the team that's top. I'm struggling to find a team that's actually top of what we've seen so far, and we've seen them all, and I've watched every game. The they've all had 3 chances to impress, but you see more of the weaknesses than the strengths. So you're 100% right. It's a great choice. Just the pronunciation, I was a bit more careful.
3.75 million is their population. So they're the new Croatia in many ways. Absolutely fabulous.
They did have, sorry to cut across you, they do have, the very first Euro was won by the USSR, and they did have 3 Georgian players in that team. So it's a little bit like the Slovaks have won. They've actually, Czechoslovakia have won in 1976. They won the Euros, and I think 15 of the 22 in the squad, 8 of the 11 that started the final, were Slovaks. So I mean, it's not such a surprise that just by rearranging the name of the country, there is some. And I did a game involving Dinamo Tbilisi, which is Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia. And they had a legend, Kipiani, who played for Real Madrid. And I went to the game and I said, I don't suppose anybody here speaks English. And Kipiani went, I do speak very good English. And he did my whole prep for me. So I've had a bit of previous with Georgia, but nothing like this. They're a rugby nation, aren't they? I mean, they're close to getting, they're probably playing the Rugby World Cups. But here they are in a football European Championship and doing the country proud.
And the only other thing I'd say about this is just after the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia split into the Czech Republic and Slovakia, I went to a European game, a European Cup Winners' Cup tie in Bratislava, Slovan Bratislava against Chelsea. And I live in Kingston, and Bratislava's no bigger than Kingston.
That's Kingston, sorry, not Jamaica.
Yeah. It's no bigger than Kingston. And a couple of years ago, we played Dinamo Zagreb in Croatia, capital of Croatia. Zagreb's no bigger than Kingston. I mean, these are really small nations. So it's fabulous. Right, okay, I just want to give a shout out to Jamal Musiala, Germany, who I think has been the most exciting player in the tournament in terms of his football. Can I give a shout out to him?
Well, because he's ex-Chelsea, I suppose you will too.
Right, okay. That is You Light Up Our Lives. Next, we're going to have one that we have almost every podcast. Now, for those of you who are ancient enough, and I think Martin and I are probably the only two in the room who are, back in the day on the BBC, there used to be, on the radio, there used to be a series of very serious, mostly serious, reports from America called Letter from America by the journalist Alistair Cook, who lived out there. And Martin loved these, and he is now doing Martin Tyler's Letter from the Gantry.
Letter from the Gantry.
Well, it's nothing like as good as Alistair Cook, by the way, who was a legend of my childhood, but it did resonate. And so, yes, so it's an essay, really, and I hope you enjoy it. One of the more tricky tasks of being a commentator is the assessment or otherwise of own goals. And as you know, Euro 2024 is having a raft of such incidents. Identifying a goal scorer is really the primary task of my profession, and giving the name the correct vocal power comes in tandem with that. That in itself is now more complicated because of VAR. When VAR was brought in, an initial thought from we broadcasters was to treat every goal with something like, well, the ball's in the net, let's wait and see whether the goal stands on every goal. But we grew up after that, and now we all give goals the full treatment and don't feel that our pride is dented if technology rules them out. But you want the scorer to be like the VAR protocol, to be clear and obvious, like Jude Bellingham against Serbia, Harry Kane against Denmark. Own goals are rarely like that. Some are. The latest in Euro 2024 from Daniel Malen, playing for the Netherlands against Austria recently, was there was no Austrian player near him. The only doubt was, what the heck was one of the Dutch front three doing back there? Well, let's name the not-so-magnificent seven who've had a debit put on their Euro accounts in chronological order. You'll remember some of these, I'm sure. Tony Rudiger, Germany against Scotland. Max Werber, Austria against France. Robin Haranak, Czech Republic against Portugal. Klaus Jasula, Albania against Croatia, though he later scored at the right end, and you'll remember that, I'm sure. Riccardo Calafiori, Italy v Spain. Samet Akaydin, Turkey against Portugal, surely the craziest one of them all. And Daniel Malen, as I say, Netherlands against Austria. UEFA also originally announced that Scotland's goal against Switzerland was also an own goal, but they revoked that and gave Scott McTominay the credit he deserved. And there was some debate about Austria's Romano Schmidt on Tuesday when his scoring header flew in off Stefan de Vrij of the Netherlands. But both efforts were on target before the deflection, and that seems a proper guiding rule. In the Premier League, such rulings are commonplace. It used to be called the dubious goals panel, but now, more seriously, it's known as goal accreditation. Such judgments can be subject to appeal. One of Arsenal's 5 goals against Crystal Palace in January was adjudged by the Premier League goal accreditation panel to be an own goal by the Palace keeper, Dean Henderson. Arsenal appealed on behalf of Gabriel, who sent the ball goalwards, and subsequently it was re-accredited to Gabriel. Alan Shearer, the Premier League's all-time leading goal scorer, 260 goals, still fervently believes it should be 261. It was Newcastle against Manchester United at St James's Park in 2001. I was commentating, and like Alan, I was sure, and I'm still sure, that Shearer's shot, which cannoned in off Wes Brown, was on target. But check the record books, it's still down as a Brown own goal. As a former non-league striker, I'm always keen to give the attacker the benefit of the doubt in these matters, but there is very little wriggle room now. The cameras rarely lie. It wasn't always thus. Until the television evolution, hungry goal scorers would claim anything within reach, and sometimes when it wasn't in reach. One of my first FA Cup semi-final commentaries was at Stamford Bridge in 1978. Arsenal against the giant killers of that season, Leyton Orient. Arsenal's attack was led by one Malcolm MacDonald, Super Mac, a legendary goal-getter in his day, once scored all 5 for England in a 5-0 win over Cyprus. The history books still show Arsenal 3, Orient 0, scorers MacDonald 2 and Ricks. Malcolm's efforts were both shots that were going way off target, but then hit defenders and ended up in the back of the Orient net. He wheeled away in celebration both times. And to be honest, no one was brave enough on the day or since to take the goals off him. There is one anomaly, though, in current interpretation. If a penalty awarded in regulation time hits the frame of the goal and then hits the goalkeeper before it goes over the line, it's classed as an own goal by the keeper. But not if it's in a penalty shootout. Have you ever heard of an own goal in a shootout? Never. The striker of the shootout penalty gets the credit. So identical incidents, different outcomes, and that doesn't sit well with me. If you want some evidence of this, go onto YouTube and you can see Shay Given own goal for Stoke against Everton at Everton. Leighton Baines was the penalty taker in 2016 in the Premier League. Hits the post, hits Shay and goes in, Given own goal. 1986 penalty shootout in the World Cup quarter-final, no less. Bruno Bellon of France against Brazil. He takes the penalty. It hits the post and it hits the goalkeeper and goes in, and it goes down as a successful penalty. So that to me is always something that sticks in my throat. But here we are with own goals topping the scoring charts at Euro 2024. The leading individual, as Neil has mentioned, George Mikhautadze of Georgia, who got his 3rd yesterday. There are lots of jokes going around about how to honour the high number of own goals, including the presentation of a golden boot. Much better for me would be a golden clog, spelt, of course, C-L-O-G.
Is there any truth in the speculation now going around that Chelsea have put in a bid for own goal?
They're looking for somebody to get some more goals.
Yeah. It's a very strange tournament. And I think one of the things that's clear about the tournament so far is that, dare I say it, the quality isn't up to much. Dare I say it, the last World Cup, the final was brilliant, but the quality in that tournament wasn't up to much. And the brilliant thing about football is, because of the structure of the game, because of the structures of the tournament, it's still entertaining because you can still see Georgia knock people out, and you can still see Turkey playing wonderful football and knocking people out. But mostly, I think people look exhausted, and I just wonder, with the schedule, if that's one of the reasons for so many own goals.
Well, I think the star players are the ones that have played all the games. I mean, there's some real differences. People like Declan Rice have played 60-odd games. Some players, I mean, Spurs had a good season, but they only played 41 games all season, got knocked out of the Cups and weren't in Europe. So it doesn't apply to everybody. But I think those who are what we might call elite players are really feeling it. And there's heat now. It wasn't the same in the first week. They had the sort of weather that we've been having here. And now it's got warm, even with the thunderstorms, and probably the thunderstorms are because of the heat. So I think that's having an impact on it. The one thing I would say is that when I was growing up, international football was the pinnacle. To play for your country meant you were playing with the best players from the other clubs. Over the years, and this was forecasted by the president of Milan, AC Milan, Berlusconi a few years, 2 decades back now, that club football would overtake international football in terms of quality, because now with the transfer of labour, if you play for a club, you're not playing with 10 other Englishmen. If you're playing for an English club and you're English, you're playing with the best players from around the world. So it's quite a different kind of concept now. And so that international football will look maybe less, how should I say, technical, but there are elements of it that are technical. I do think England are playing a bit like Premier League top teams, passing the ball more than perhaps they need to. But that's a story for later on, really. So I think you've got a point. There is a big debate going on in football now about the scheduling. The players are, I don't think they'll ever go on strike, but they're threatening industrial action. This tournament next summer, the Club World Cup, with 32 teams. Chelsea are in it, Manchester City are in it, but obviously all the elite players from other clubs are in it, certainly from Europe. There are 12 European clubs, I think, out of the 32. And they're saying enough is enough. Or we will play, but don't expect us to play the best. And I think that's what we're getting a little bit here. They're trying their best, of course they are. But Mbappe, actually, I went to a meeting where they had an interview with Mbappe, who speaks very good English, by the way, saying, I will play, but you won't necessarily get the best of me, and that will go for all of us. We'll try, but, we are human.
Yeah. Okay, we're going on to our regular item now, which all FIFA followers will love, which is 3 of the best.
And he makes them pay.
3 of the best. He's made them pay, and that completes a wonderful hat-trick.
Young player, old player, player. Martin, your young player.
Well, Crystal Palace, Mark Gahey, who I think
We've just been talking about Crystal Palace during the break.
Yeah. And Mark Gahey, I think of all the England squad, has performed above the level of expectation in a position where, whatever the comments about Harry Maguire, he served England extremely well and would have been an important player in this tournament for sure. Gareth Southgate totally trusts what he does. So England was short. John Stones hasn't played many games going into the tournament, not many games all season really. And Mark Gahey was sort of the next in line really. He had some international experience, but he's come in, he's exuded calm. I've met him a couple of times. He's a charming young man who is not the sort of person that would panic in these circumstances. A lot of the criticism of England is that the young players are finding this very hard to deal with. What they say, the England shirt weighs heavy, when you get capped. It's not the same as playing for your club where you've got a lot of protection. You're out there in the public gaze. Everything you do, every touch of the ball is scrutinised. And he's been ice cool. England have defended pretty well. The criticism is about not what they've done without the ball, it's what they've done with the ball. So I think
it's funny, in fact, that people were talking before the tournament that we'd score loads of goals but wouldn't kick them out. Yeah. And now that we're not scoring loads of goals, nobody's talking about the fact that we are actually keeping them out. And
it's part of the conditions of me sitting next to Neil that somebody has to have a Chelsea connection. And Mark Gahey, of course, does, but he went elsewhere to further his career, and all credit to him. Not enough.
£18 million is what Crystal Palace paid for him from Chelsea.
Bargain,
absolutely.
Bargain.
And one of the questions we had during the break was if Southgate goes, who should replace him? I think Gareth Southgate needs a lot of credit for going with Mark Gahey, a Crystal Palace player. We've got Crystal Palace supporter in the crowd, but that's no disrespect to you, much. But going for Mark Gahey over English players who are playing maybe at a higher level.
Who's the better player, Gareth Southgate or Mark Gahey? There's a question for you from Crystal Palace's point of view.
Mark Gahey, much better. Gareth Southgate never played for Chelsea. But Mark Gahey is somebody who maybe the rest of England wouldn't have said he's the man. But he's proved the man in the tournament.
Yeah, he's had a great group stage, and I hope he kicks on because he deserves success.
Yeah, and as you said, a very bright young guy. My young player is, as you'd expect, Cole Palmer,
Hasn't he been the young player every week? in the
No,
podcast?
I've never had him. I've never had him.
Have you?
You might have had him. I haven't. I don't think you have. Cole Palmer came on, and for the last 20 minutes of the England game against, was it Serbia, the last England game? I can't even remember. It was against Slovenia.
Yeah.
Of course it was. Obalak, by the way. I haven't celebrated Obalak getting into the knockouts.
No, he might be the best goalkeeper in the tournament. You talked about the Georgia guy who was very good as well.
But Cole Palmer came in and he didn't light up England, but he made them better. And obviously, I've watched Cole Palmer all season, and you know, it's a manager's job to keep players' feet on the ground, and sometimes you're going to make your breakthrough performances against lesser sides. But Everton came to Chelsea towards the end of the season with a pretty good defensive record, and Palmer scored a hat-trick, the perfect hat-trick, right foot, left foot header in the first 25 minutes or something. He scored 4 goals in all. But in that first half, I saw a boy who had come to Chelsea with prospects give an actual world-class performance. That's what it was. It was a world-class performance. You were at the game.
It was. I commentated, and it was a joy to commentate on, particularly the incident where he had to fight to get the ball to take the penalty.
That was the 4th goal.
Yeah.
But this boy had put in a world-class performance, and somehow, I don't know, I'm not saying how, and I'm not saying he's got to go in for Saka, who I think is a wonderful player, but somehow he has to play in the coming games because he has creativity in his soul.
One thing I can add to that is I don't know what's going to happen now that Poch has gone and his coaching staff, because they touched the ambition of Palmer, because they said, we've coached Harry Kane, we've coached Kylian Mbappe, so Spurs and PSG, and we think you're in that bracket. And Palmer wants to be in that bracket. He's not immodest enough to say he's in that bracket, but that was the sort of conversations they were having now. Obviously, it's changed manager now, but that ambition is rock solid to be the very best player he can be. And that may seem an obvious thing, but not all players do feel like that. Sometimes they get to a level and that's comfortable for them. But this is driven ambition. I mean, it's an amazing season that he's had. And he could be the difference if it is big decisions for Gareth now, who to start, who to change. That he played an unchanged team and then made one change now he's really got to rethink. And they say that you need one team to qualify for a tournament, and then you need another team in the tournament. Well, I think they might need a third team. Now, the team that's qualified, the team that's got through the group stage, top the group, not everybody's cup of tea, hardly anybody's cup of tea, but now he needs a team to go and win the knockout games, and he's got the players in that squad to do it, and we can't wait to see what the team is going to be on Sunday.
Okay, old player.
Yes, this is a bit of a complicated one, really. It's a reflection of Romania, who deserve a mention because they topped their group as well. And it's a little bit personal in the sense that there's a connection between this Romania, 2 connections in fact, between this Romania and the Romanian team that have done very well in the past, particularly with Steaua Bucharest, their club side, European champions in the 80s. And their coach, Eduard Iordănescu, he hadn't had a great playing career himself, but his dad, Angel Iordănescu, was a great player for Romania and 3 times national team coach. So he's done it 3 times. Eddie's on his first go at it, but may well, it's an extraordinary family connection. And I covered some of those games, and Angel Iordănescu, some coaches understand that there are television commentators and know they have a job to do. Others go out of their way to help the commentator. And Angel Iordănescu, who spoke very good English, he helped me enormously. So I was thrilled that his boy is doing so well. And the other connection is Yanis Hadji who won the penalty. Slightly odd VAR decision yesterday. I don't know if you saw it. But he's the son of Gheorghe, or Georgi Hadji, as everybody called him, Gheorghe in Romanian, who won 124 caps as one of Europe's great players, and was a real artist on the ball. And so his lad is playing, and that's it's a nice feel. And for them to have some success, I think it's pretty tough to be a son of a famous player. And we've seen some fall by the wayside, some want to go and do anything but be involved in football. These two, the next generation, are making legacies of their own to separate from what their parents have done. So good luck to them, and they've had a great tournament so far.
Yeah, and Georgie Haji was one of the world's best players of his generation.
He
Wonderful
was.
player. My old player isn't World Cup, it's Alan Hansen, who...
good choice, very good choice.
Obviously was released from hospital in this last week after his illness. I think he doesn't get the credit he deserves as a footballer. That sounds crazy, given how much Liverpool won and how people say, oh, best player of his generation.
All our audience remember him as a television pundit, won't they?
But the fact was, really, before Alan Hansen, I can only think of Bobby Moore in English football, who wanted to play out from the back in the way that Hansen did. And when Hansen was joined by Lawrenson, who was the same, signed from Brighton, Liverpool were on a different wavelength to any other team in England. And I can remember those European nights at Anfield, watching it on television. And they would spend 20 minutes, Liverpool, bombarding the opposition. And if they hadn't scored, obviously if they hadn't scored, the Kop went silent, because that's what the Kop does. But Alan Hansen, having led the bombardment from the back, or fed the bombardment, I should say, from the back, would put his foot on the ball and he would change the tempo of the game. And he ran the tempo of the game in those great European nights at Anfield. And Alan Hansen was a player, for me, above everybody else, every other defender in the Premier League of his era.
It's odd because football intelligence, and you're right to highlight that, doesn't always go with what we call natural intelligence, if you like, being bright. He's both. Alan was such an engaging, thoughtful, clever person, and ridiculously good at other sports as well. Probably could have been a pro golfer, lives by a golf course. And with Liverpool, they had the most wicked sense of humour, that group of players, and he was very much part of that. And along with Kenny Dalglish, his fellow countryman, you weren't safe if you were around.
And Graham
They would be having one-liners at your expense, but also with a kind heart as well. And I would say, along with you, that it did seem quite serious that maybe we wouldn't be saying this, or maybe saying it in a different tone. But well done, Jockey, they call him. Jockey, great to have him back in the land where he's contributed so much,
And he went to, I think, more funerals than anybody else post Hillsborough. Maybe he and Kenny Dalglish, between them, went to more funerals than anybody else.
Yeah.
But top man.
Caring person.
Player.
Well, the Austrian team is full of players. I know you like Marcel Sabitzer, who is probably if you like, the biggest name, really, and scored the winning goal in one of the best games of the tournament against the Dutch recently, when they kept getting pegged back, and somehow they found the strength because Ranić was telling them what to do, and they found the way to win the game, and he played a big part. But I've gone for Nicholas Seiwald, who doesn't play all the time for his club in Germany, and he's conspicuous for not being conspicuous, if you understand what I mean. He just keeps the team ticking over. He's actually quite easy to recognise. He's certainly not big and strong. He's just somebody who sort of just fits in, knits the team together. He played every minute of qualifying, and I think he's played every minute of the tournament. And he's not got one headline. But if I was a Premier League scout, I'd be thinking, here's somebody who could do a fantastic job for my team. And whether he'll get that kind of move. Sometimes tournament players, there were some Moroccan players in the World Cup who we thought, well, they're going to come to England and be in the Premier League, and that didn't really happen. So maybe if Austria keep going, he will be seen as that. But I just picked him out because, as I say, nobody else has picked him out, and he deserves to be picked out.
I've gone for a load of players. I always like to go for a load in order to
Yeah.
grab more time than Martin.
It's,
I've gone for a
says
load of players.
Player here, it says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the reason I've gone for them is that they're all linked. And we've talked a lot, not just in the podcast, but going back over the years, we've talked a lot about the dearth of centre forwards. I mean, you were talking about Fulkrug earlier on because he's what you'd now call an old-fashioned centre forward, but there are just no centre forwards anymore. So my players are these: Lionel Messi, the right winger who was turned into a centre forward at Barcelona by Pep Guardiola; Cristiano Ronaldo, who, when his legs started to go, went to centre forward from the wing. Now, the extraordinary thing is, back in the day, you talked about the Wimbledon-Liverpool Cup final. The former centre forward of Wimbledon, Alan Cork, because his legs had gone, played on the wing, and Fashanu played up front. So everything's gone the other way around. Now, Mbappe is playing up front for France, but they're playing 4-2-3-1, so he's a lone striker. With Real Madrid, he's been moved up front, and he's playing with another winger turned centre forward in Rodrigo. But there's two of them at least, and that works. On his own with France, he looks completely out of his comfort zone. And you're thinking, in the first game, Deschamps played Marcus Thuram on the left wing. He's a centre forward. Play him at centre forward and play Kylian Mbappe on the left wing. You're Didier Deschamps, talking of intelligent people and intelligent footballers. That's what he is. What's he doing? What is he doing? And I don't know if you saw, but in the first game of Brazil in Copa America, they were held to a 0-0 draw by Costa Rica. Brazil 0, Costa Rica 0. What did they play? They played 4-2-3-1, and the lone striker was Vinicius, a winger. And they played Rodrigo on the left wing and Rafinha on the right wing. 3 wingers in the team.
Is Vinicius still liking the podcast, by the way?
Oh, yeah, Vinicius did like the podcast.
He did,
when I talked to him. Yeah.
We like Vinicius.
Yeah.
For that reason alone.
Yeah. Top geezer, Vinicius. I went in the mix zone at Real Madrid after they'd spanked us one time, Chelsea.
That's where the journalists can talk to the players.
Yeah. And Real Madrid took him in to speak to the Spanish media, and he stood there for 15 minutes, and there was uproarious laughter all the way through. I don't know what was being said because I don't speak Spanish. But the interesting thing is, of course, his first language is Portuguese. So here he was entertaining in a foreign language this mass bulk of journalists, and he was just at ease. He was smiling all the way through, and he just looked like a top geezer, and he just spanked my side. I hate him. But he's another one who's been played at centre forward, and the only one who has improved his game recently, going from wing to centre forward, is a guy I didn't even know was a winger until you told me.
Ollie Watkins, who was a winger at Exeter, and probably at Brentford as well, and has turned himself into that rare commodity of a player who actually has been restricted by Unai Emery to play box to box, so not to go to the wide areas. So he'd be tempted to do that. And he's upped his goals tally, got himself in the England squad, and maybe now, having come on as a sub, into the England team. But he's a very studious person about how his game works. You know, he could talk really well about his thought process, which again doesn't happen with every player. Some of it is so instinctive. Well, how did that? Well, I just hit it and it ended up in the net. How often have we heard that? But he could give you some reasons as to how it ended up in the net.
So I'm just looking at these wingers turned centre forwards, and I'm wondering what goes through the minds of the coaches who put them there. And if you watch Real Madrid, the reason it's worked with the 2 wingers as 2 strikers, they play ahead of a midfield diamond. So someone like Cruz holds, and you've got Tchouameni one side and the Uruguayan
Valverde.
the other side, and Bellingham at the
Keeps
front
doing
of
this
the
to me,
diamond.
throwing names that I have to come up with.
That's
I'm like the prompt, but the script's a million pages long.
But then you have the two wingers turn forwards. But Rodrigo's right-footed and plays on the right, and Vinicius is left-footed and plays on the left, and they keep pulling out, and they're comfortable. When it's Mbappe and Vinicius, and they're both left-footed, I warn you, it won't work.
And I'll tell you one thing, Füllkrug will never play on the wing. Mario, you can agree with that?
Right, that is 3 of the best. On to Voice of Passion.
Voice of Passion.
Penalties. I think that the stutter, stop is cheating. I think it's cheating. It's not cheating because the laws of the game allow it. So basically, this is just another boring tirade by me against IFAB, who make the laws of the game. They're the arm of FIFA, run by David Ellery, who is the shocking referee who took the 1994 Cup final when Manchester United beat Chelsea 4-0, and has been on a downward trail as an official ever since. It started off, I didn't mind when it was one stop, but for me, the worst one of all was the second penalty on the retake of Lewandowski in the France versus Poland game, after Maignan had splendidly saved the first one. And that's the other player I'd like to see Chelsea buy. If I can't get the Georgian goalkeeper, I'll have Maignan.
I'm just wondering at what point do I talk about Jorginho scoring penalties for Chelsea with a stuttered run?
Oh no, I thought it was unacceptable. I thought it was unacceptable.
No, you didn't. You cheered.
I did cheer, but I
And
thought
then
it
you
was...
said it's unacceptable. Yeah.
I mean, before him, we had Eden Hazard taking penalties, and he didn't do that. It wasn't the stutter. He kind of stroll up, see what the goalkeeper was doing, and then...
Yeah, but Eden was like...
Yeah, then decide what he was going to do. This stutter, Jorginho was probably the first huge practitioner of it, and I don't think it's right.
John Aldridge.
John Aldridge,
Yeah, John Aldridge did it.
Didn't work in the cup final against Wimbledon, did it? That Wimbledon.
And who saved the penalty?
Dave Besan.
Who later played for...
Yeah, top man.
It's amazing how this goes round that ends up at Chelsea.
It's not like that.
Every story that we do.
It's not
this
like
is
that.
our 14th show, and I bet there's only about 3 conversations that haven't involved Chelsea.
Because we buy everyone. But seriously, I think...
We being Chelsea, not us.
Yeah. I seriously think this is got too extreme, and I think it's unfair on the goalkeepers, because when Maignan comes off his line by 6 inches, it's because the guy hasn't taken the flipping kick.
He knows that. Why doesn't he stay on the line? Wait for him.
Well, he doesn't know it. That's the whole thing.
He does know it. Everybody knows Lewandowski takes penalties like that.
I think
goalkeepers know everything, by the way. Everybody knows everything. Data is extraordinary. That's why there are, I don't know how many professional footballers, but you multiply that by 10 and you get the number of data people that are working on it. It's extraordinary. The law is, when you put your foot down alongside the ball, you have to kick it. Up to that point, you can do what you want in terms of stopping and starting. That's the law. The goalkeeper's law has improved for goalkeepers. They used to have both feet on the line. Now it's only 1 foot, so they can push off forward from the 1 foot, which is what Maignan did. And he should know better. And had that second penalty not gone in, I have it on very good authority that it would have been a retake again. So Lewandowski could have kept on going if Maignan keeps coming off his line. Yeah. He knows the laws, and I know you love him and you want Chelsea to find him, but he was at fault, and Lewandowski did what he had to do.
Lewandowski took advantage of a bad law, and I think it should be changed.
Yes.
Who agrees?
No.
Thank you. I win.
We did these podcasts at Neil's house, and there's a lot of 20-mile-an-hour driving things through there. That's a bad law, by the way.
Here, here.
No, I must say, if it saves people's lives, it's not a bad law, but it's bloody hard. And I have to go. To be honest, it's truthful. Until we started the podcast, I'd never been to Neil's house. Now, every time I go, I have to really concentrate, much more than the podcast itself, but going and getting out of Neil's place, that I don't offend the traffic regulations.
Yeah. I actually got done going to a Chelsea game on a Sunday morning for driving 24 miles an hour and a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Did you do a course?
No, I've done my courses. I got 3 points. And
that suggests you're a serial offender then.
Right, let's move on. Let's move on.
I'd move if I were you, Neil, into the country.
One final new segment, one game.
Yeah.
And this is the knockouts. And just a reminder for everybody here what the knockouts are. Switzerland, this round of 16, obviously. Switzerland, Italy, Germany, Denmark, England, Slovakia, Spain, Georgia, France, Belgium, Portugal, Slovenia, Romania, Netherlands, Austria, Turkey.
Well, I've been backing Austria in terms of interest and wanting to see them play, so I'll have to go for Austria-Turkey to see whether they can do it. I think Austria might almost be favourites to win that. They've not really come into the tournament favourite to do too much, but they are very well drilled. And as I say, Ranić is making. What I love about football is the whole must be greater than the sum of the individual parts, and he's made that happen. And other teams, other countries are struggling to make that happen. But he's already done it, and Turkey have got amazing fans. There's millions of families from Turkish backgrounds live in Germany, and some of them play for Germany. İlkay Gündoğan is obviously Turkish origins, captain of Germany in this thing. But they've got fantastic support. So that'll be something. Austrians have got their own fans who've only got a few miles to go to the game. I would say that the noise level has been one of the highlights of the tournament, and this could actually set a new level, a new decibel level. A fascinating game because Turkey have got some talented players, probably haven't quite seen the best of them yet. And that's what happens in tournaments. Countries like Italy usually start slowly and win the World Cup. That kind of thing's happened in the past. So it's not the best thing to have your best result. The only time I can remember it was West Germany in 1990. Mario, were there still West Germany in 1990? Or was it unified Germany in 1990? In Italy, the World Cup in Italy. And they beat Yugoslavia, who was still together as a country then. 5-something in the first game. And I walked back to the office, having commentated on the game, saying, I've just seen the world champions. But they never played as well in the tournament again as that. But they did win it. So you can, if you start high, if you're good enough, you're good. So I think we're going to look at all these countries now in a different light because it is a different stage of the tournament. It is glory or go home. And that affects different people in different ways. So I think we'll see more attacking football. And I think we'll see some great games. It's fantastic. So you could pick any one of those games, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's the last game, in fact, of the round of 16. So it's the late game on Tuesday. I'm going for the late game on Sunday, which is Spain versus Georgia. And I don't think Spain are right. I don't think they've got goals in the team. They got 3 against Croatia in the first game, but that was a bit of old man Croatia more than prime Spain. And I just think they will have trouble scoring goals. And I think Georgia can make a game of it. And if there's going to be an upset, I think this could be it. And Georgia have just become the entertainers, really. Spain are still playing lovely, lovely football. They really are. But there's no final punch. And
they are playing more progressive football than I did that game in Qatar when they got knocked out by Morocco. And it was self-inflicted death by 1,000 passes. They just bored the pants off us all watching. And they did, I think it was the lad at Wolves, Sarabia, hit the post, didn't he, in the last kick of the game, and that was about the only punch they had. And Luis Enrique, who's now in charge of Paris Saint-Germain, got what he deserved. And this is Luis de la Fuente has got a much more positive frame of mind. And yeah, they have got an ex-Chelsea centre forward as well. So you're right. Do you want to carry that on?
Alvaro
Neil?
Morata. Yeah, not my favourite. Pass.
Oh, that's a new one.
This is the joy of football.
Yes, it
He
is.
was the guy who was out for 6 weeks with a bad back, and then his wife put a photograph of him carrying her around the house on Instagram, and I don't forget.
That's what I have to live with in this book.
Okay, one game over. In fact, that is the end of the podcast, except we have stoppage time,
Stoppage time.
which goes on forever now.
But not in the Euros. They've changed that, haven't
Have
they?
you enjoyed that?
Yes, I have. I don't know why. Probably because I've been watching every game and I'm thinking, well, I can have a cup of tea now or something. But I just think there've been the right ones. There was a 10-minute one when the stoppage for the injury to Barney Varga, Hungary, and obviously that went on for a long time. But by and large, I think if they're refereeing properly, the ball is in play more anyway. If they're really hurrying the game along, stopping the delaying of the restarts by booking the players, which was the big thing at the start of the season that's just finishing. Well, we're going to do this all the time. I remember Julian Alvarez of Manchester City in the Community Shield game booked. He knocked the ball from there to there and he got booked. I've seen players knock it from there to the barman and still not get booked. So they have these initiatives and then they kick back on them. So, no, to answer your question, I think it's about right now.
Yeah, I agree. But this stoppage time, we are going to turn our attentions, as promised, to England, who, Martin, have, I think, won the group stage boredom award.
It is what you do. It ain't the way that you do it. That's my counter to that, which is the reverse of the old song that nobody in the room will remember. But that's what is getting results. That's the punchline in the song. It's done, they've done what they've had to do to get through. It could have been more exciting, could have built up expectation much greater than it has done. I think that's one thing that probably will work in England's favour. This is the first time I've been at home when England have played in a tournament since the 1970 World Cup. So I'm not used to what goes on here. You hear stories when you're abroad at the tournaments, but you don't really experience it. And obviously, somebody told me the other day, they've taken all the England flags down in this estate near where I live that as a sort of gesture of disgust of what's going on. But I wouldn't be surprised if they're putting the flags back up again because the room for improvement is considerable. And it does change.
I'm going to put you on the line here because
I don't play on the line.
I've had enough of you being a commentator. I want you the coach.
Ooh.
And would you make any significant changes with England?
Probably put someone on the post at a corner because I've seen so many goals that go in this tournament when nobody's been on the post, and I'm told by all the coaches that's rubbish and old-fashioned, and we play people offside by having nobody on the coach. Who was it? Patrick Schick. The ball hit the post, hit him, and went in one of the Czech Republic games. Now, to answer your question seriously, I would not play Bukayo Saka at left back, which is what you want.
I would.
I'd be hoping that Luke Shaw from this part of the world would be fit to go in at left back, but that's not looking as though it's going to happen straight away. It's maybe one gamble that's been taken that could not. It might work out, it might not. I would think that the central midfield player, I don't know whether they'll start with Conor Gallagher again. I'd be surprised perhaps if they did. Cole Palmer and Anthony Gordon revved up proceedings. There's no question about that. Whether that's enough and a cameo to say, well, you're going to start. I think Palmer is ahead of Gordon.
How do you feel about the theory that whatever their form and whatever their lack of technique at times in the penalty area, the pace of Marcus Rashford and Raheem Sterling haven't been replaced, and it's all a bit pedestrian?
That counter-attacking but teams haven't attacked England. That's the problem. Where's that space? Where is it? There's no space. So they've got to try and pass their way through. They're not quite. I mean, there's only Harry Kane and Bellingham can get in the box for crosses, but it's difficult to get crosses. You've got a left-footed right winger in Bukayo Saka. You've got Kieran Trippier, right-footed at left back, who's not going to whip balls in with any great confidence. And Foden, who does play on the left and is left-footed, wants to play in the middle. So we're trying to piece all that together. Well, I think with some difficulty. I'm different to a lot of people. I just want to win, and I think football has changed in my time from it is now part of an entertainment. I get it. I really do get it. But if you gave me the choice of entertaining and losing and winning and being boring as like the cup final of 2007 and the worst games I've ever seen, with Chelsea beat Man United on a Drogba goal in the 100 and something minute.
117 minutes.
If anybody was awake, even in the stadium at that time, I would be surprised. But they won. And obviously I was alive in 66 and it was a fantastic time to be an Englishman. But since then, I've suffered with everybody else. And the only way out of that is to win. And if by winning you make people a bit discontented about the way you do it. Ramsey got criticised in 66. England were playing with wingers. In the 3 group games, they played with 3 different wingers. John Connelly, it was called in those days.
Burnley, Manchester United.
And Terry Payne.
Liverpool,
they were the 3
Southampton.
wingers. They played the quarter-final and Ramsey decides not to play with wingers. Wingless wonders, it was one of the headlines when they won the World Cup. And Ramsey was, well, what are you doing? The press was saying, just like the press now, all those years ago. And he won. And we're still talking about it now.
Okay, let me just put one other thing to you.
I would be looking to find a way to win whoever we're playing against. And it wouldn't really matter the team selection. If I found that was a weakness in the team and I had to move somebody there to do that and we won 1-0, I'd be quite happy.
Let me put one other thing.
I don't think the country would be.
The team can't score goals. Harry Kane looks as though he's treading water. But he's obviously a supremely talented footballer. What he definitely can't do is run in behind. Now, you might say everyone's parking the bus against England, and so you can't run in behind.
And Slovakia will do the same.
But when Ollie Watkins came on in the middle game for him and ran in behind, it made a massive difference. And I'm not a particular Ollie Watkins fan. But when a few weeks ago we chose our Premier League 11 of the season, you went 2 up with Haaland and Watkins. I give you Harry Kane and Watkins, drop Bellingham back with Rice, and then Harry Kane can be the second centre forward or the number 10, which is what Bellingham isn't doing very well at the moment. And you have 2 up. Argentina won the World Cup with 4-4-2.
I'd be looking at the data about the fitness levels of the players, particularly the players who played like Rice, Kane, played really extravagantly long seasons. Jude Bellingham as well, although he's the youngest of that group and could probably play every day at this stage of his life. And just to see where that lack of sharpness has been. We mentioned earlier the heat is a factor as well. What is England's 5 o'clock kickoff, the game? Yeah, it is, isn't it? That won't help. So I'd be looking for energy, to find some energy. And there are lots of ways of doing that without naming specific players. But I think that's if England can harness energy to the talent, they will get the sort of results that the country wants. And certainly you and I want. Well, I don't know whether you do, but I do.
As long as he chooses Chelsea players, I want England to win. But what I would say is, I didn't think Gareth Southgate had that good a World Cup in Russia when we got to the semi-finals. He got the luck of the draw by losing one of the critical games in the group stage, coming second and getting on the correct side of the draw. The old cliche of it doesn't matter if you're a good manager or not, it matters if you're a lucky manager or not. Gareth Southgate has got the lucky side of the draw again. If he has a good run, he can get England to a final. Doesn't matter if you're a good manager or not. it manages.
And
matters.
so let's have the situation. And we're now going to the final, and England are going to play it. They've won 1-0, 2-1, scratchy penalty shootout maybe, and probably not very likely, but they might have won a penalty shootout. And so they're in the final. And so what's the public going to be here? They've not entertained. They've grafted their way through the tournament. What are people going to say? Are they going to say, well, that's great? Or are they going to say, well, we haven't enjoyed it? Surely you can enjoy it with each passing game. And the momentum should be built up. I mean, Greece won the Euros with the most boring in 2004, very, very few goals, you know. Portugal got the lucky half of the draw in 2016 and won the Euros. Honestly, people are talking about that. I have to remind people they got the lucky half of the draw because nobody wants to remember that. They just know that Portugal won. England win. And to be honest with you, as long as it's within the spirit of I'm not a win at all cost person, but as long as it's within the spirit and the integrity of the game that we all love, then how they do it shouldn't matter.
Well, Woking won a lot of FA vases.
Trophies. The vase is a vastly inferior competition.
Trophies. So you know the joy of football, winning.
I do.
I know a little bit about it.
And I lost a semi-final as a coach of Woking in the FA Trophy and would have gone to Wembley had we won it. So, yeah, I'm not that good, mate.
That's it. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, John Lewis, for having us. And if we could just stand up for the cameras here. We're actually dressed in John Lewis clothes. They branded us. We are...
I'm in teal, which is a colour that I've had to describe on football shirts because somebody's usually their fourth kit or their fifth kit is this lovely colour. But it's not a colour that we associate with football shirts, but it's a shirt that I will wear with pride for many, many months to come, maybe every day.
And I think it's really good to have this podcast in a wine bar. Everybody, cheers. From Martin and me,
goodbye.
Ta-ra. And if you're still running the cameras, now we're going to have the real talk.